Well, basically, I usually like to start off anyway with just letting the guest do their own intro and kind of touch on the points that are most important to them, really. So if you'd like to do that for us, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, of course. So as I said, I'm Claudia, but like everyone calls me Clau Nader, and I am Mexican, Lebanese, but currently living in the UK. I'm based in New York, so I'm currently doing some doctoral research on ASMR, which we will talk about at the end of the session, more or less. And my background is in sound engineering. I've done work for TV, film, advertising. I've done a lot of advertising because that's good to pay the rent. My pronouns are she, they. I'm a non-binary woman. And yeah, I'm an educator as well, and I love science communication. And just a disclaimer, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a neuroscientist. I love those topics, but I don't have a certificate or a degree on those areas, just to make it clear. I'm a sound engineer.
Amazing. Well, my background is actually in sound engineering as well. That was what I did. I used to run a recording studio in my 20s. So music's kind of always been, to call it a slight obsession would be an understatement. It was always been a pretty huge obsession. Okay, so how did you actually jump from sound engineering into mental health and well-being?
Well, it's actually a interesting question, because when I was doing sound engineering, my degree was very focused on music, but just because that was the only thing available back home back then, some time ago. So I already knew that I wanted to do sound for visual media. But there was like only music. I mean, I love music. I love producing music. I'm a musician as well. But I was very into audiovisual media and sonic art installations and stuff like that. So around the time that I graduated, I started having like symptoms of like weird symptoms that I like didn't know what was going on. So I was diagnosed with partial epilepsy.
Okay.
That we suspect was triggered by a car crash years ago at the start of my undergrad. So around like I graduated and I was like all into like sound design for visual media. I knew that I wanted to do a master's. And then in the meantime, you know, like all the bureaucracy, like papers, scholarship, all that stuff, I was dealing with side effects of medication, and that was horrible. So they started giving me medication for partial epilepsy, but actually the medication triggered depression and anxiety, and like it was awful. Like honestly, I mean, I don't regret anything because I'm here right now. But it was like a very, very negative experience for me because I had like so many side effects. I like even my personality changed. I couldn't even think properly. And I was trying to exist, right? Like I was trying to be functional. I was trying to work. I started working in a studio and like we worked for television, and that environment is so quick and so fast paced and so demanding, and you need to be focused all the time. And it was a very tough experience. So I was actually very angry. And shout out to my doctoral supervisor, Dr. Mariana Lopez. She always tells like people that want to study something, like a research or something, what makes you angry?
Yeah.
So I was actually quite angry about my experience. And I thought, why not like focus my work with sound? I don't know how, but how, like maybe I can explore what can I do with sound, with my talents, with my skills, or maybe, you know, like studying more for mental health. So I can, I don't know, offer whatever is in my hands so other people don't have to go through this same experience. So that was how I was like interested in learning about mental health, neuroscience, psychology. Again, I don't have a degree, but I'm very passionate about those topics. Then I finally got a scholarship and I moved to England to do my master's. And that's when like things got real. And yeah, that's how I jumped into like anything that has to do with mental health, well-being from a sound engineering or media studies or arts perspective.
Awesome. And could you give a few examples of like things that you use sound for now in that sort of supportive of mental health capacity?
Yeah, so I guess I can talk about how you use sound, like in a beneficial way, but also how can sound be actually not very positive for people. Again, a shout out to my supervisor, for example. She has a team and a project enhancing audio description, right? So this project is about making films accessible for visually impaired audiences.
Yeah.
So they basically use spatial audio to integrate the narrative and to enhance the storytelling. So visually impaired people have the chance to enjoy the pieces more, like people that don't have a visual impairment, for example.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, I use music for relaxation sometimes. I use guided meditations to focus sometimes. Like sometimes I watch ASMR inducing videos, but very specific ones because I'm very sensitive to sound actually. And I experience more misophonia, which is basically hatred for sound, for specific sounds, than the opposite, which we think might be ASMR or something like that. I'm using my friend's cat to actually relax because her purring like is so relaxing. So I'm just like stroking her and just listening to her purr.
So could you tell us a little bit about misophonia?
Yeah, sure. So there's like some studies about misophonia. I think it's getting attention more and more because of the hype with ASMR. So basically, misophonia is understood as a hatred for sound. And it's kind of like demonstrated that it has to do with different wiring in the brain. So it's different wiring, but also there's some like bits like affect that have to do with how people react to certain sounds. For example, autistic people. Some autistic people, because not everyone, might have hypersensitivity to sound. Some other autistic people might not. And it's just like part of the brain that is like wired in a different way. Yep. But also there's trauma. So some people might have experienced trauma certain sounds, specific sounds might cause a reaction. But that's like a little bit different than misophonia per se. For example, if I listen someone chewing next to me, it makes me angry. Like it just irritates me so much that I just can't. I just need to leave the place. Or if I'm in a test, for example, taking a test, if someone is just clicking their pen like constantly, that drives me nuts. Seriously, I can't control it, and it makes me so anxious and so irritated that it's not okay. So it's something that really affects people to a severe level sometimes.
Yeah. How old were you when you kind of discovered this, like within yourself?
Misophonia, ASMR, or well, I guess I've always been very sensitive. I didn't know. I didn't know how it was called until I actually started doing research some years ago back home. But I've been always super sensitive, like loud noises. I've never liked crowded places because I find it like so noisy and so overwhelming. So ever since I can remember, I've been real sensitive. Or for example, family reunions. We Latinos are known for being like very loud and very, enthusiastic. So like for me, family reunions, I love my family, but the reunions were so overwhelming for me because everyone's talking at the same time and so loud, and it's like, ooh. Or yeah, some people just chewing, like I can't.
Yeah, I mean, I have issue when there's things like reunions. There's a lot of conversation, a lot of stuff going on at the same time. But I think that's a developed thing for me because it definitely wasn't there as a kid, and then it was only after as an adult that I was not the right type of person to be left on their own until I was sort of in my mid-20s, and then I had some time to myself for the first time in my life, and then actually just enjoyed silence and stuff. And it's like I used to love constantly being around people and things and things going on. And then after I had that period of time to myself, it's like I don't have anywhere near the same tolerance to it. But one thing I've found is that I have bipolar disorder, and I have sensitivity to sound, but only when I'm symptomatic. So like I don't have sensitivity to sound when I'm in the middle. When I'm overwhelmed already, like when I already feel like, symptomatic of bipolar and I'm feeling overwhelmed or anxious a lot, then sensitivity to sound kicks in for me. And it was only something I only discovered a few years back, and it's been a bit of a bizarre one for me, really. While we're still talking about sound, I want to go on to ASMR, and then we're going to jump into the intersectional stuff in a sec. So in terms of ASMR, you just mentioned the hype of it. ASMR, in a little bit, it's on Twitch in particular. It's used very freely, shall we say? The same most tags, most tags on Twitch are used a little bit too freely. The mental health one being one of them. But with ASMR, could you kind of define what true ASMR is to us, please?
So ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. And the name might sound very catchy and very scientific and very formal, but it's actually not. So basically the term was coined around 2010 by a gal, Jennifer Allen, in a virtual forum. So people started discussing a sensation that they recognized they had ever since they were a child. And it's like a tingling sensation in the head, in the scalp, in the neck, and in the spine, followed by a sense of relaxation and mild euphoria. And sometimes like it is accompanied with like warmth, for example. So yeah, that's like a sensation that people have in response to certain stimuli. For example, I remember when my mom or my sister were tickling my back when I was a kid. I did have that. Like I remember that perfectly.
That's why I have this back scratcher.
Oh, nice. Yeah. But have you seen like those head massagers?
They're amazing.
Exactly. So for people that don't know what I'm talking about, if they try like one of those head massagers that are like a spider, it feels something like that. So it's really cool because it's like a
I was going to say, I'm actually getting tingles thinking about one of those right now.
Exactly. Oh my God, that's amazing that you said that. Because yeah, we're like, there's so much to explore. Seriously, so much to explore. Even though the sensation is not new, and so many people around the world experience it and report that they've experienced this since childhood. Like the term is really new, and the conversation just started really. Some authors, for example, Sylvia Plath or even Virginia Woolf, mentioned described the sensation, obviously not with the term because it didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
But in their novels, they actually describe a flow of energy through my brain and through my head and flowing through my spine and the warm and blah, blah, blah. It's like waves of energy, blah, blah. So you can see self-reports or anecdotes through time about the sensation, since ages ago. So when the term was coined, basically people started getting excited about the term, and some people might think that this is a sensation that everyone experiences. I actually thought everyone experienced it. Some other people might think that there's something wrong with them and that, they're weird or that they're alone. So when people started discussing about this sensation, people started recreating real life triggers, triggers that people might find triggering in real life, and started filming themselves recreating that to elicit the sensation. So that's how ASMR is like getting like so popular. I'm trying to propose that we call it ASMR inducing media. ASMR IM.
Because ASMR is the effect, not
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So when I talk about ASMR, it's a sensation, but then ASMR inducing media is like the media that we're using to elicit the sensation. Because ASMR, we can experience it in response to any sensorial stimuli. For example, bath bubbles. I get ASMR with bath bubbles. Oh my gosh. It's just.
You see, I do love that you've like we use this on the stream quite a bit. Is if you remember or think of something that has an effect on you, it brings the effect into now. It's the same principle that anxiety works on. A person visualizes something that would make them anxious and they feel anxious now. But if you actually spend time visualizing things that give you those good feelings, then you actually bring those good feelings into now as well. It's like we do the negative version of it, so to speak, but the positive version of it, it's something I'm trying to get more and more people on board with, really, is that, okay, like think about experiencing that, think about that, like, those feelings, and you'll get it. You'll get literally people who'll kind of full on kind of like they'll get the shit. Yeah, exactly. And honestly, those those head scratcher things, I've not felt one of them for, I'm going to say, about 10 years. And as soon as you said it, I've forgotten about them, that they even exist, and my brain went ping and felt what I felt like 10 years ago. It's like, that's so amazing. It's quite a, I think is quite a distinct anchor that's got in there. So sorry, go on.
Some people might be able to recreate or to self-trigger. I was actually talking about this with a colleague. Shout out to the ASMR Network, a group of scientists and that are working with artists researching ASMR. So we were actually recently discussing I experienced the sensation. If I think about it, if I think about my real life triggers, I can get the sensation, maybe not as intense as I get it with firsthand triggers, but I do get it. But there are some people that cannot. So there's so much room for research, really.
How do the two things with ASMR inducing stimulus and misophonia, how do those two interact? Because obviously certain sounds for good, certain sounds not so good. It's how do those two work together?
So that's great that you mentioned that, because there seems to be a link, actually. So some people that might experience ASMR tend to experience more misophonia. And there's some evidence for that. There's not much scientific evidence because really research is only starting on ASMR, right? But there is a little bit of evidence that people that might be more kind of open to sensorial stimuli or that are just wired up in a more sensitive way, might, if they experience ASMR, they might experience misophonia as well. So maybe it's not my area of expertise because I'm not a neuroscientist, but there's a lot of affect involved in how we react to stimuli, right? So for example, I don't like whispering. They make me cringe. So all those videos that involve whispering, oh my gosh, that's actually misophonic for me.
Yeah.
But this same video is a super strong trigger, ASMR trigger for someone else. So I don't really know the basis for that, but there is a link. The only thing that we know is that there is a link.
Yeah, I think basically both of them are in the principle of sensitivity to sound. It's just what what does this trigger? Like we've used the word trigger a bunch of times in this interview so far, and commonly in the mental health space, people think of the word trigger as a negative. It's always used in it's triggering PTSD, or it's triggering it's triggering someone's negative condition. But there are things that trigger positive conditions as well. There are things that trigger positive emotions as well, and it's and that's the whole thing. Is it's those. If I imagine if someone is predispositioned to be sensitive to sound, they're sensitive. It makes sense that they might be sensitive to it in both a positive and a negative sense, dependent on the sound itself. So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see when the research is done, like if there is kind of, because same as we call our community on Twitch diversity, which is short for neurodiversity, and because there's me with bipolar, there's people with BPD, there's people with autism, there's people with ADHD, we've got pretty much almost everything represented within there, and there's a lot of kind of studies saying about that a lot of these different things do relate to neurodivergence and do relate to kind of, for example, something I only found out recently. I think it's like 80% of people, because I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm literally stimming with this thing underneath the table right now just to kind of keep me focused. I never sit still. Like I fidget like crazy. This chair's great. Yeah. So I've got this light here it's squishy on top. It's great.
Oh my God, I love that.
and I only found out a few weeks back that 80% of people with bipolar also have ADHD. So basically there's a 1 in 5 chance that I've not got it. But yeah, it does seem to make sense that if the brain is working in different ways, then those differences can be both positive and negative. I mean, and again, positive and negative are all interpretations as well, aren't they? It's like, it's how much we watched the video on ADHD before, and it said basically for a diagnosis, it's like you're talking how much does it impact your life? Well, actually, I meet something like 5 out of the 7 criteria, but I wouldn't say any of them really negatively impact my life. Like me fiddling with things under the table isn't really affecting anyone. Okay, admittedly, some of my interviews can go like sideways for about 2.5 hours.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, me too. That's like my brain, so it's very coherent with my wiring. So
that's why I loved it when you sent through the here's the talking points that I want to get to, because I was like, yes. It's like I want every guest to do this for me now, because I'll just be like, I'll be away with something. And someone said earlier as well that my tangents, I was talking about the fact that when the chat goes quiet, I sometimes sit there and I'm like, oh, I've got nothing to respond to and I can't think of anything to say. Yet sometimes someone will ask one question and then that's me away for 45 minutes.
Nice.
And it's, yeah, unfortunately, that's the way it affects me. I haven't ever found a way to completely direct it where I want it to. I just kind of roll with whatever direction it goes with most of the time.
Go with the flow.
But yeah, cool. Right, let's use that nice little guideline to get us back on point now. What's the research saying so far in terms of how ASMR is impacting people's mental health?
Well, we're like at the very, very early stage of that. What we know is from like anecdotal evidence. So if you go to YouTube or even Twitch or any social media or virtual forums talking about ASMR, the majority of people report that they find it helpful for anxiety, for insomnia, for depression, and the little scientific evidence that we have demonstrated that people who experience ASMR through these videos, like that's helped them even like for chronic pain. So there must be something going on, really, right? There is a study by Dr. Poirot and Tom. So this study demonstrated that the heart rate of people who experience ASMR while watching these videos actually decreases, even though there might be like a little bit of arousal, not in a sexual way, but just like mainly like body response, like a little bit of euphoria or excitement. Yeah. But general responses of people's heart rate decreases significantly. And it's actually compared to other type of like therapeutic practices like mindfulness or meditation, for example. So the range in how the heartbeat, the heart rate decreases is actually comparable with those practices. Mm-hmm. So there's like this little scientific evidence, but I think it's a great starting point to kind of like explore. But yeah, it's so broad, seriously.
Yeah, no worries. And are there any kind of other alternatives, apps, games, VR and things like that?
Yeah, it's exploding. I might not be aware of like everything that is out there. So I guess it would be cool for people to explore if they experience ASMR in real life, like what type of triggers they find positive for them. For example, in my case, the bath bubbles. Mm-hmm. Or I remember back home, my car, I don't know what was the head like rest thingy material from. I squished it and it gave me ASMR. I don't know why.
This is quite nice, actually. There's like memory foam in this. It bounces back. It's supposed to be.
So I guess I would start from there, and then just just jump in YouTube and just type ASMR and see if there's any type of media that might work for people. There are also like free applications. I think there's like VR going on as well. Like there some, for example, advertisement or games are like utilizing typical ASMR triggers for sound, for example. Mm-hmm. Integrating that in storytelling. There's films as well. And yeah, there's just like so many. There's even live ASMR, like in the same way you would go to a gig, to a concert.
Yep.
There's live ASMR inducing performances. Yep. So it's, I love it. Like, even though most of the videos make me cringe, I love it. And people are finding, like this as a very creative way of expressing, of creating storytelling, and helping others. So that's, what's wrong with that? I can't find anything wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I often say to people about meditation is when you're doing a guided meditation, most there's about 6 meditations in the whole world, and they're all just adaptations of each other. But what makes the big difference is whether or not the person's voice, like if you find that person's voice easy to listen to, that's probably going to be a much better meditation for you than if you find it like you can't stand the way the person says. The one I used to listen to was hard-backed chair, and the way he said, every time he said sitting firmly in a hard-backed chair, and I'm like, 2 seconds in, and I'm feeling like I just can't. And there's
you can't. So is that like kind of misophonic for you?
Potentially. Like there's my wife puts the sleep stories things on, and she's always like, does this one's voice get on your nerves? And I'm just like, no, this one's okay. But the weird thing is, and because I do guided meditations as well, and a lot of people seem to like my voice. I've never really thought about whether I do or I don't. But my wife is like, I went in one night and she had one of mine on, and that was it. It didn't sound weird, but it felt weird because I'm like, okay, that's my voice. I'm okay with it. But I'm listening to my own meditation. Like, that's just. Is that odd? And I don't know. It was just a strange experience. But I guess the same would be true with ASMR, because it's huge on Twitch, absolutely huge. And as I say, like, people, I'm not 100%. I think most people make that misconception that you said earlier, is they think that ASMR is the sounds rather than the effect. So there's a lot of whispering, lots of it. There's a lot of different sounds, and it's what I would say is that, generally speaking, the ASMR artists that are on Twitch, they do have sort of a range or a subgenre of ASMR, of the type of sounds that they create and stuff. And again, if you do enjoy it, but you find that one person's sounds are triggering in the wrong direction, then again, probably the same as I'd say with guided meditations, it's look around until you find one where the tone actually gets on with you. Awesome. Right, we've got other important things to talk about. We spent a little bit longer on that than I was intending to, but that's okay. Because the prime directive of our talk today was to talk about intersectionality within within mental health care and, well, health issues and education. So could you touch on kind of your stance on that and why you think that's so important?
Yeah, well, actually, it's not that far away from ASMR and like why I'm so passionate about the topic. Because it's like the whole world is experiencing this. We have people reporting from so many different countries, hundreds of countries around the world, from all ages. So that's why I love the topic so much, because that way we can explore how to help people in a more personalized way. And I guess if we want to talk about mental health and well-being, we need to be intersectional, because we all have different backgrounds. And it's not the same, for example, someone that grew up in a busy city, for example, I grew up in Mexico City, than my cousins that grew up in a very calm town or in the countryside, right? So when we were talking about like the responses, like early in the talk, that you are like, all the time, like in like fight or flight mode, you experience things really differently than people that are just like maybe in the middle, like just in a more stable mood or in a more stable mental space. So we really need to look at how people experience their whatever conditions they have, or like just like at their experiences. We need to listen to people. As I mentioned before, when we talk about autistic people, if you mention autistic people, maybe the first thought that some people might have would be a boy recluded in a corner, not talking to anyone, like rocking back and forth and being like very smart for maths.
Yeah.
That's a stereotype.
Yeah.
And actually that's, like neurodiversity, that's it, neurodiversity. And there's, oh my God, I'm getting ASMR. I tend to have ASMR with like interesting talks.
From topics. That's
good. So yeah, I lost my train of thought. See, I told you.
It's okay. You were talking about neurodiversity, as you know, as a principle. It's like we can't work off stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to take into account that different cultures might experience things differently, just because they don't have, I don't know, they have different views, different religions, different food, different metabolisms, like it's so varied. And the information that we have, the research that is out there, is been basically done by white men with white male participants. And if we look at the history of research, right? Obviously, I'm generalizing. This is not the case 100% all the time, but this is a tendency. So if we want to support people's well-being and mental health, we need to start listening to people's experiences from any backgrounds and developing more personalized support. Dr. Poppy Crum, she's a neuroscientist that I admire a lot. She works with empathetic technology, and she says that this model of one size fits all, that doesn't work, because we're so different, and our neuroplasticity, like how our brain is wired, how it's like programmed when we are growing up, is so different based on our experiences, right?
Yeah.
And even, for example, now that we've been in lockdown, in the first lockdown, the first time that I was shielding because I have asthma, the first time that I went out for a couple of blocks, oh dear, I had an anxiety attack. I was just actually testing how I felt. But it, like, if a car passed by, I would be like so sensitive. But why? Because I have a history of complex PTSD. Why? Because I'm like, initially I'm already like hypersensitive to sounds, to smells, to touch as well. And like there's a lot going on behind that. So you cannot expect someone just like to chill, right? You cannot tell people, oh, why don't you meditate? It's like, actually, meditation triggered me a lot of anxiety for many years. I'm just like being able to go back to it right now, but for many years it didn't help me. So there's alternatives for people. There's different ways that people can be helped. For example, some people find ASMR helpful. This is not for everyone. Some people might find it annoying, right? Mm-hmm. We're doing research about it. But how can we be intersectional? Well, if you are going to do research, try and go to different communities, to different cultures, to different countries, different socioeconomic strata. So that's why we need to be like, to have an intersectional approach. If we talk, for example, about the LGBTQ community, I am a queer woman. I tick so many boxes. Check this out. Latina, Arab, queer, non-binary woman, and neurodiverse. So there's so many things that I need to consider to actually understand my experience and to be okay with it. So that's like the same case. And we have not been taught this. We've been just taught that, oh, yes, you have depression, just get your antidepressants and you'll be fine. It's not how it works. Or, just go and take some CBT like therapy and you'll be fine. Well, actually, CBT triggered anxiety to me, and severe anxiety, actually. So we need to expand the research and we need to understand how like different, factors in people's identity affect their health, their emotions, and the way to respond to the world, actually. Like, for example, all the trauma, there's a collective trauma in the Black community. There's a collective trauma in like different people of color cultures. There's a collective trauma in the LGBTQ plus community. So all this, we cannot think individual at the first, like at the start, because it's collective. Mm-hmm. And we need to start like, kind of like dusting and just like seeing what's behind that. And then when we understand like so many factors that like affect people's background, people's lives, then, okay, so what's your experience, right? So yeah, we don't, like we can't expect someone, a trans person, for example, that their identity is not validated in a very conservative circle. If they are experiencing depression, if they are experiencing trauma, we cannot expect them to be just like healthy, giving them antidepressants. We need to actually offer them support, especially like initially for their health, anything that they required, so they can express their trans identity and to tackle dysphoria, body dysphoria. And, like after that, okay, after you understand what the person is going through or has gone through, then you can understand why they are responding in that way to their environment. So yeah. No, amazing.
I think great answer as well. I think one of the biggest problems is this concept nowadays that it's the question is, how can we scale this? It's like everything's like, how do we scale this? How do we scale this? And it's and that's the whole thing. It's like I do part of my work in association with the NHS, and when the work that we do there, we do for a local NHS in Lancashire and South Cumbria. But like when we've kind of had meetings corresponding about that, the questions always come up: how can we scale this? Like, and it's always like, okay, we found something that works for a population of people. How can we scale it? But even within populations of people, there'll be people that this doesn't work for, and it's such a strange position, because No, everything nowadays is marketed or mass produced, and it's like it has to be sold, or it has to, like, even if it's being sold to a healthcare system, it's still being sold. And if it's like to turn around and say, actually, this won't work for everybody, it's like you've kind of got to brush. That's an inconvenient truth. You've got to brush. This won't help for everyone, and then you've got to like literally be like, yes, this absolutely will work for everybody. You've got to, and then. It's like for the people that it doesn't work with, there's a question that we have banned on my channel, which is what's wrong with me, because that question never asks, that question never leads you anywhere good. But if for example, like meditations, I personally love it. I know a lot of people that do, but I don't sit here and say it's the be all and end all. If I was solely a meditation coach, then it's like, can you imagine that? Can you imagine me putting that as my advertisement up on Facebook? Meditation is not the answer to everything, and then in small print, but it might be the answer for you. It's like it's always done the opposite way around. It's like meditation is the answer for everyone. Asterisk, but maybe not you, and. And this is kind of the thing. It's like I think we need that overarching mindset of how can we scale this. It's like okay, we need more individuality in it. We need less kind of cookie cutter, run of the mill. This is the you have anxiety. Here is our one solution. Because the problem again is when you say you have anxiety, here are some things that might help. Even then, the person that have been offered those things, we're less inclined to try things that might help. So I think we want to be told this is the answer, but there isn't the answer. So I think both the people that are pushing it and the people that want the care, I suppose, both need to kind of we all probably need to do our own bit to kind of say, right, well, this is something that does help for a lot of people. Be curious, give it a try. Like we said before, trying out a few different ASMR channels, trying out a few different meditations, trying out like different nutritional approaches or different exercise approaches. And it's like because ultimately where a lot of people get stuck is because they know that that no one's got the perfect answer for them. They think that the perfect answer doesn't exist, and whilst we're looking for the 100% solution, we'll be walking past like 10% solutions or 25% solutions that could help. And I suppose if our expectations going in are, this is going to help me manage my symptoms whilst I continue to find the answer, if the answer is out there anywhere. But I think there's a very big issue with the perception around all that. And it's like, okay, right, we need to have a healthcare system that comes in under budget. Therefore, we need to offer why. Yeah, exactly. It's a whole great big mess, and it's just terrible.
I think it would help also to think about in the same way that we think about neurodiversity as being a spectrum, or gender identity, like gender being a spectrum.
Yeah.
Like well-being is a spectrum, as well, in the sense that it's fluid. And sometimes meditation works for me, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's about like knowing yourself and understanding your needs, instead of like going with what has been sold, which is very hard, obviously, because that's how the system works. There's like this social model of disability that is basically a way of seeing the world that actually. There's no disabilities. It's the world and the society and how the world functions that is not accessible for people that might be visually impaired, or for people that might be hearing impaired. So yeah, it's I guess like I would like see it from the other way around.
Yeah. The society that we have established has been established to the way that fits and suits the majority, and as a result, it's like you're classed as having a disability if your disability stops you from being able to fully experience things in the same way as the majority. Let me just get back to the point. If anyone's got any questions in chat, by the way, start popping them in, because we are going to be kind of wrapping up reasonably soon. How can people become allies and or activists?
I guess the first step that I would say is listen. Listen to what people are saying. And don't listen to give an answer, and don't listen to just give a reply. Just listen, for God's sake.
Yeah.
If an autistic person, or even like self-diagnosed autistic person is telling you how they experience the world, well, it's how they experience the world. Like, you have no like voice in there. If a person is telling you what gender they identify with, well, like you don't have a say in their gender identity. Like, that's personal. That's something personal. So start listening to people, and start believing people as well, because there's a lot of I guess like stigma, and there's still like a lot of, it's not skepticism, because I'm a very skeptical person, but I think people need to like go outside of their bubble and start understanding that not everything is like their experience. So in order to develop more diverse support alternatives for people, we need to understand what's going on. We need, for example, to develop science communication strategy. How am I going to communicate this to a non-specialist audience, for example? How am I going to talk about psychology and sound engineering and all that stuff to kids? So there's like so many ways that people can like be active and support social justice, but it's not only about listening, but creating a safe environment. A safe environment where people can actually express what's going on. Because like there are so many cases, for example, in Latin America, it's so hard to be an activist because, trigger warning, you might get killed. Like, you might get killed by drug cartels, even like by governments. If you do something that they don't like, if you are, protesting, they might just like send some military people and shoot you or kidnap you and disappear you, right? So if we create like safe spaces where people can express what's going on, and also for people that want to be allies to ask questions, because sometimes we're scared to ask the questions, right? Maybe I'm not a Black person, right? I'm not a trans person. So I might not know a lot of things that Black people and trans people know because of their experience. But maybe I might be afraid to ask some questions because I don't know if that's going to cause pain, if that's going to be respectful, I guess if it comes from like the good place, like from a curiosity, from an empathetic place, and from a compassionate place as well, it's really, really valid and really necessary that if you want to be an ally, you need to be safe to ask questions as well. And people, we need to be open and understand that everyone's experience is different. And there's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of stigma, but in the majority of cases, not because people are bad people, it's just because they don't have the information and they don't have the experience. So I guess it's like, a collaboration between creating a safe space so people can express what's wrong, so can people ask questions, but not necessarily, some people won't feel comfortable talking about that, and that's okay too. So I guess there's like a balance between that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the big reasons I'm working to have these type of conversations in the podcast. Mainly, there's a lot of learning that I want to do, and I'm not gonna get that learning by my own experiences, and it's like, and I think one of the things I'm so glad of with the podcast and with collaborating with people through Twitch and so on and so forth is getting to hear other people's experiences, getting to hear their point of view, because that's like, there's there's a big issue with trauma comparison. Like there's a big issue with like your trauma's not as big as my trauma. It's like my trauma's even bigger than that, and that doesn't sound too bad. You know, it's like okay, try living that forever. Like the thing is, even kind of within the UK, it's like, with like, you know, a much less diverse demographic, you can see that traumas vary massively, but people's response to trauma, two people could experience the exact same trauma. Like, you know, two people could be in, for example, the same car crash, and their relationship to that trauma, their brain's ability to recover from that trauma, or you know, those things can be completely and utterly different.
Yeah.
And it's like I kind of did a video on YouTube recently that says that mental health is a double spectrum. You've got the spectrum, which is where all the conditions are, and then within each condition, you've then got a spectrum of how that condition is represented. And like, I'm not the poster child for type 2 bipolar disorder. You know, it's like I am someone who has type 2 bipolar disorder, and here's my experiences of it. But I don't for 1 minute think that my experiences are everyone's experiences of that. And I think it's important for us to kind of think that way as well, because, like you said before, that stereotype of autism, it's like that's based on probably a representation in the media, and it's like, oh, people are like, okay, I've seen that now. And we had a great conversation on someone else's podcast a couple of months back about whether whether media. Well, we were talking about the show WandaVision, actually, whether WandaVision did a good representation of mental health, and my question kind of back to this was, did it need to have done though? Like, because this is the thing is, I think the problem, there's a two-sided problem to that. One is that, okay, the media is not representing mental health accurately, but we've also got to understand that it's also not representing like firefighters accurately, or medical dramas accurately, or anything like that. It's doing them for entertainment purposes. And my bipolar disorder, except for when I'm symptomatic, really boring, would not make a good entertainment. But the thing is, I think we need to kind of think, well, we shouldn't be getting our ideas of what autism is from a film. We shouldn't be getting our ideas of what bipolar is from watching Homeland. You know, it's like we should be like looking to, again, people that have got the lived experience of this. That's where we should be getting our interpretations from. And even then, if you sit and have a really deep conversation with someone with bipolar disorder and they tell you everything about it from their experience, even then, like, I don't understand it 100%, and I've been living with it for 38 years. No, wait, I'm 39 now. When did that happen? so it's like, I think as people on the other side, it's having that attitude of wanting to learn more, you know, wanting to learn more, wanting to increase kind of your understanding. You know, that what you said before, listen to understand, not to respond. Again, a conversational style that we've all adapted is listen to respond. And that's actually why sometimes in my interviews, when I do interview people, I'm like, what's my next question? Because I've totally listened. I've been just engrossed in what they were saying so much that I'm like, oh, good. That's actually usually a good sign to me. Although I'm like, crap, I don't know what I'm a terrible interviewer. I need notes. But it's quite flustering. But at the same time, I'm like, that means you were actually lost in what they were saying, which is good. which is good. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
Well, I might need to disagree a little bit with you with the power of storytelling, actually. Because I'm a storyteller as well. So I do believe that it's necessary to represent more diversity. And I think that will help a lot. It will not represent every single diverse people, because that's the thing, everyone's so diverse, but it can showcase stories, like real stories. And if you put, like, you need to give the spotlight to people from underrepresented groups. If you're going to tell the story of a person with bipolar disorder, well, do your homework, have a researcher on bipolar disorder, have someone, maybe an actor who experiences bipolar disorder. If you're going to have the plot of a Black person, can we please stop making like stories of how the Black person is the one that is suffering the movie. You know what I mean? Yes, there's a lot of trauma, but Black people have lives as well, and Black people go to work as well, and Black people are successful. So like the way we are representing people, like from different underrepresented groups on screen is really important. But we need to give the microphone, and we need to give the pen and the paper and the camera to people that know from experience about the subject, or at least that they really know about the subject, that they do research, that they specialize in the subject. So yeah, we need like more neurodiverse directors, actors. We need more like neurodiverse or just like people of color doing games, being the lead characters in a game, for example. Mm-hmm. So I think it is really important. It's fiction, if it's not a documentary, obviously, but we need to understand that it's fiction. But the way media has contributed to the stereotypes that we have in our head is massive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, first step is like listen to people in real life, but also just be more representative on screen and on media in general.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose when I said it does, I probably was a bit flippant saying it doesn't matter. What I actually mean is, again, I generally, like, my answer to always is whose responsibility is it? It's like fill in the rest of that question, and then the end of it is everyone's. It's like, so whose responsibility is it whose responsibility is it to understand mental health? Well, it's our responsibility as people with mental health issues to do it, but it's also the other people's responsibility to try and it's like, and if we think about that, like, whose responsibility is it to understand or to be understood, for example, like within different cultures. Like within a lot of Asian cultures, it's the responsibility is on the listener. It's their job to understand. And whereas within more Western culture, it's on the responsibility on the speaker. But that gets lost again. And quite often, if someone doesn't understand, if I basically always take responsibility if someone doesn't understand me. Like that's kind of my rule going in. So I'm like, right, if someone doesn't understand me, I'm like, how could I explain this better? And I try and do my best. Whereas, as I say, in some cultures, it's more considered, well, the other person should just understand. And I'm trying to think of what book it was that was talking about this with. It's a Malcolm Gladwell book, and I think it might have been Outliers, where it was talking about within aviation, because obviously within aviation you've got people from all cultures, and again from I think it was I'm going to say it was South Korea, or it was definitely one of the Koreas. The pilot would say something, but he'd say something like for example, weather predictor has been good to us today. And what he actually meant by that was he was expecting the other person to infer from what he'd said that there's a lot of heavy snow and therefore we should. There was a whole script, and it talks about like, okay, what we've got, if we both take responsibility to one person to speak clearly, the other person to do their best to understand, and vice versa, then we do get a lot further with things. And so I suppose, like, from that perspective, like, yeah, I do believe, I suppose when I'm saying that we need to be, as consumers, I can influence a consumer. I'm not really influencing Hollywood directors here. So, like, unless there's any Hollywood directors watching right now, in which case, first of all, please represent us correctly. But I can speak directly to a person that might have gone and watched a film. And that's like, I suppose, thinking of it from my own bias, really, and that point of who am I trying to personally serve? I'm trying to personally serve the person that's watching that. And what I can say to a person, for example, like I've not seen it, but I've heard that Sia's film about autism is absolutely dreadful, and didn't take into account, didn't use an autistic actor, didn't take into account like any of that, and is actually reasonably harmful. That's only what I've heard. Like, I've not seen it personally. I know one of the other streamers that I know, Jen, showed an alternative movie to that on her stream last week, which was written, created, and starred in by autistic people. And and like again telling their stories, and again that's that. But I know that I'm not speaking to Sia when I talk to anybody on my stream. I don't think anyway. It's like, if I am, I'm not going to lie, she gives me a bit of misophonia. Weirdly, only after she changed her voice. Like, I didn't even know it was her on like Titanium and a few older songs, right? I'm like, oh, that's Sia. I've only found out about like 6 months ago. I'm like, she was on a lot of 07's early stuff, and I was like, that doesn't sound like Sia. And eventually you kind of pick up on the tone, but she changed her voice when she started doing solo stuff.
Oh, God.
And I personally find it a little bit grating, but but yeah, I've gone. This is one of my tangents. So yeah, so basically Hollywood do better, but Hollywood aren't listening. So us as listeners, until Hollywood does better, please don't get your ideas of what an accurate representation is. Get your ideas of an accurate representation from going and speaking with people of color, speaking with people of other sexualities, speaking with people with transgenders. You know, like and when you do that, then this amazing thing happens, and you stop seeing stereotypes and you start seeing people.
Exactly.
And you'll get that a million times more by interacting with people in the real world than you ever will. But I agree, storytelling is extremely powerful.
And I agree with you. Like, we can, when you said that some of the symptoms that you have don't really affect your life, like just fidgeting or stuff like that. I agree. You know, like when one recognizes its own condition, its own self. For example, I have like seizures whenever I'm too tired, whenever I haven't slept. So it's like, that's like my personal alarm to understand that I'm really tired, that I need to rest. Obviously, there's some degrees, there are different levels. But I guess like it's about like celebrating as well, like other people's experiences and what other people can do with like because of or not because of whatever condition they experience.
Yeah, amazing. Just to finish off, any groups or resources for mental health support focused on people of colour, underrepresented groups, and the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do some shout outs.
By the way, you've got any links for any of this stuff? This will be going on YouTube probably next week as well. And we can link up to as many links as you want in the description. Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely. I'll just send you a bunch of links. But a shout out to my pals from the York Anti-Racist Collective. Amy, she's one of the co-founders. She's doing an amazing job to kind of like get our community in York a little bit more visible, and like from an intersectional point of view as well. So it's fantastic. So shout out to Amy and the York Anti-Racist Collective. You can find them on Facebook, on Instagram. Another shout out to the ASMR network. You can find them as ASMR _net, I think, on Twitter. So I'm just like so excited about that network. They're doing all types of research on ASMR. So people from so many backgrounds, psychologists, neuroscientists, sound engineers, artists. So we're going to work directly with ASMR artists and with people in the real world, and see how we can bring this to the next level. And yeah, just there's the LGBT forum in York as well. Shout out to Jake, who's done an amazing job to make York a safer place and a more vibrant and colorful place for all. And yeah, I'll just send you like some links. The Yorkshire Sound Women Network as well. A shout out to Liz Dodson. Liz is doing an amazing job for women and underrepresented genders in the audio industry. So it's crazy. It's amazing what Liz is doing. So shout out to her. And yeah, I'll just send you a bunch of links.
Yeah, you send them all. And finally, where, if people wanted to connect with you, where would you recommend to go to for that?
So Twitter, my handle is @CLAU_NADER. Facebook, it's just like /Clau Nader, like CLAUNADER. And I'm on Instagram as well, but like my Instagram, I just put about everything really. If you want to see a lot of plants and food and animals, pictures and videos, follow me in there. So it's CLAU_NADER. And just Google me, literally just Google me, and you'll find like my academic profile from the University of York, my technical profile of the Audio Engineering Society. Shout out to the Audio Engineering Society and to the Science and Technology Council of Mexico, who are like supporting my research. So yeah, I literally just Google Clau Nader and you'll find a lot of me. That's creepy though.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you Google Dave Cottrell, you get a champion budgerigar trainer. Yeah, he's got a cool little medallion thing and everything. He's about 6 million years old, and a drummer. But I am slowly but surely. If you Google Mindset by Dave, you just get me.
Yeah.
But with Dave Cottrell, I am beginning to appear higher in the rankings now. But weirdly, it's always like third-party articles. It's never stuff that I've personally done. So you search for Dave Cottrell and you get. And I know what, I feel like I should just ditch my actual real name, because this podcast is, when it goes out, it's going to be called Master the Mind, Master Anything. It's like, and its name on iTunes is Master the Mind, Master Anything by Dave Cottrell. But nobody's searching for Dave Cottrell's podcast, are they? They're searching for Mindset by Dave's podcast. So I'm considering renaming it.
Why not? I'm Clau Nader. I mean, they named me Claudia Nader Jaime, but I'm Clau Nader. So.
Yeah. The funny thing was, I actually originally we looked at a little animation video from about 3 years ago, and my original company name was Dave Cottrell Mindset Coaching, so that my real name was in there. Only problem with that is no one can spell Cottrell.
Oh God.
There's a Catterall. There's a Catterall, there's a Cottrell, there's a Cottrell, there's a Cottrell. It's all fun. Is there anything else you would like to add before we sign off?
Well, just thank you so much for inviting me to chat with you. It's so interesting and I love it. And I could just like chat forever with you. And just get in touch if you want to know anything more about my research, my work. If you want to send me any pictures or memes or videos of animals as well.
Amazing.
And yeah, so I'll be, recruiting for participants, hopefully in the summer. Let's see if my university allows me to do that in person. Fingers crossed, we'll see. So yeah, maybe a shout out to people that might be interested in participating in my experiments for ASMR.
All right, excellent. Well, let me know when that all comes through and stuff, because I know for a fact there's a few people on the Twitch audience that enjoy ASMR. So I'm sure I'm not mentioning any names. Cristiano. I'm sure they probably love it. But yeah, thank you again for joining me. And yeah, everybody else, !love, !hype up in chat to show some love for Clau. And I will catch you all soon. Right, I'm going to go over to... No worries. I'm going to go over to my Be Right Back screen, and then I will be right back.
Thank you so much. Take care.